Welcome to Talkin' Entertainment from Rip City with Brandon Laws and Dan Zeal. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, or you can follow us on Twitter at TE from Rip City. Enjoy the episode. Hey, it's Brandon here, and welcome to Talkin' Entertainment from Rip City. Hey, we've got a special episode for you today. It's going to be the best of the decade, and this is a part one of a part two series that Dan and I are doing. In today's episode, we are going to touch on all the movies that stuck out to us in the decade of 2010 through 2019. Leading up to 2020, we're entering a new decade, so we talk about all the movies and different genres that we really loved, and you're really going to love this episode. So make sure to reach out to us if we missed anything that you feel should be on the list. One thing to note about this particular episode, we had some technical difficulties. And so you're going to hear audio quality may change on my end. I had some internet problems, so I recorded in a couple different microphones in different locations. So you might hear a difference, but overall it should flow pretty well. So enjoy the episode, and again, reach out to us. Welcome to Talkin' Entertainment from Rip City. I'm Brandon Laws, and I got Dan Zeal for a very special best of the decade episode. Dan, what's up, buddy?
Hello.
Are you excited about this one? This is your brainchild. Everybody's doing lists for the decade and their best of, and we're jumping on that bandwagon. Why not?
Yeah, I thought it'd be something kind of fun to do. It's not necessarily a list of like movies that we ranked. It's just kind of a lot of movies that we've talked about over the decade, and ones that we personally feel like some sort of attachment to, or some things that we enjoyed, and just kind of a crazy look back to because there's so many things that happened in the last 10 years, and it's crazy to think how much actual stuff came out.
It's funny. I don't know if you had the same reaction I did, but there's always recency bias when you factor in movies that made an impact, or anything really that made an impact, because you automatically go to what was recent because you remember it the most. And it's not until you really start like going back further, and you're like, wow, that was this decade, huh? Thought it was further, like a long time ago.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that to you earlier in text, and I totally left it off the talking points, but I'd seen somebody talk about it on Twitter as like the movie Dread came out this decade, and that's a movie that I love myself. Like,
did you really?
I love that movie very much. Like, it's very enjoyable to me, and I go back and watch it all the time. And it's a really underrated movie. It's the one with Carl Urban, and so
yep.
Definitely one of my favorites, but it's crazy to think it feels like it came out a lot longer than.
Remind me, because it's been a few years since I'd seen Dread, but wasn't that the one where they in the newer version they basically were in that building the entire time and kind of like trying to get out of it or something? Wasn't it something like that where they were trying to? Yeah, okay. So it mostly took place fighting to get out of the giant building.
Correct.
Or prison or whatever it was. Okay. Good stuff. Yeah, that was pretty good. I wouldn't put it on my top of the decade or whatever, but I guess if you're talking about reboots, it's not bad. So let's dive into some of the movies that were the most influential for us this decade. Like you'd mentioned, there's no particular order to any of this. I personally, it's so hard to build a list from top to bottom, so we're going to kind of jump all over the place, but why don't you start, because I feel like I know where you're going to go with the first one.
One of the things that comes to mind right off the top of my head is I kind of put the MCU in general in there, and I think the two movies that come to mind, obviously, is Marvel's Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, just because of what they accomplish. Yeah, these movies kind of tail end the decade, but when you look back at everything, what these movies mean, there was like probably three or four Marvel, Avengers movies that came out this year.
Yeah,
But I mean, really, what these movies kind of brought and they stood for was like, 20 the culmination of like 20 some odd movies, and most
it's
of those
crazy.
came out in that decade. Like we were talking
Yep.
about Dread a minute ago, but like movies like the first Guardians of the Galaxy came out this decade. So it's really kind of crazy to think about
I'm
that.
looking at the list right now of when they actually came out, and they kind of put them in phases. And Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk were the only ones that were outside of this decade. So Iron Man 2 was in 2010, and then everything else has come out basically within this decade. Isn't that crazy?
That is, I mean, that's a lot to think about too. Is like this, it's really shaped kind of what this decade meant. I mean, if you think about it, prior to this decade, how Avatar really changed the way that people view cinema, and the past decade leading into this one is that 3D was the big boom,
Mm-hmm.
and now you see how serialized storytelling going from movie to movie is really what people clamor for, and like that was like the biggest issue that people had with the new Star Wars trilogy is that it just felt like there wasn't really any continuity and it didn't really have a
Yeah.
plan. I think we've just gotten so accustomed to what Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios has done, and like I said, specifically like Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, the scope and the scale of those movies is just unprecedented, and what they pulled off is miraculous. It's and I'm sure when we look back at 10 years down the road, it's going to be crazy to think. And if I don't know if Marvel's going to be able to do it again, but I'm excited to see what they come up with in the next decade.
Yeah, it definitely feels like this decade was the one of Marvel Universe and comic book movies in general. I think it was an all out blitz and people wanted more of it. So I'll always remember this decade for that.
Yeah, 100%.
So since we're on kind of like series and like Marvel universe, but there's a universe that I like a lot, and that is the John Wick universe. Those that is like near the top of my list if I had a ranking. The John Wick series. All three of them came out this last decade. Fantastic series.
This kind of really started the Keanu Renaissance, and you know, Keanu right now is hotter than more than ever, and I think that first John Wick movie kind of had taken people by storm, and people didn't really know what to expect by it, and they kind of caught flame by word of mouth, and I don't think I ever had a chance to see it in the first one in theater. I think I wanted to, and then when it came out, I had rented it, and I was like, oh my god, this movie is incredible. And like I had told you about it, and like I had told everybody I could about it, and I was like yelling from the mountains how amazing John Wick is, and like now you sit in casual conversation like today. Well, I was talking with some coworkers today on lunch about John Wick and just Keanu in general, and just the kind of impact it's had. I think you know these movies leading to the Keanu sauce. This is why we get like Bill and Ted 3 and so many of these other great movies. So it's really incredible.
Yeah, for sure. Dan, the podcast gods. I don't know if they want us to do this decade podcast because we're having technical problems. I had to switch to my AirPods, but we are back. What's next on your list?
Well, we briefly touched on the new Star Wars movies, and we're talking about kind of the way Marvel kind of revolutionized this decade with storytelling, and albeit the new Star Wars movies were a bit of a bipolar topic for people. They either loved it or hated it. You didn't really find a whole lot of people in between. That being said, like you know, just having new Star Wars movies in general, really kind of brought that love that people had for Star Wars. Really since the original or the prequels came out. Like you know, whether you like them or you hate them, you just have to be happy that we had a whole three new Star Wars movies that came out this decade. I think all three hit a billion. So
Yeah, and I think it probably inspired a whole new group of people loving Star Wars. Like for example, I don't remember ever seeing any of the Star Wars movies until the new ones were about to come out, and you'd let me borrow all of the Star Wars movies from going back, and so I watched them all right before all the new series came out. So it's created a whole business opportunity for Disney. They bought that franchise, they expanded upon it. Now they got the Mandalorian, they got Disney theme park stuff happening. So like I I think the new Star Wars really impacted that franchise.
yeah, and I think the coolest thing that it did was it really it brought a new generation to see Star Wars, and like my nephew who's 5 actually, he went to go see the new Star Wars movie with his dad at the same time that Nancy and I went to go see it, and so like the impact it has on this next generation is kind of the coolest thing about it. They get to experience Star Wars in a completely different way than we all have. And not even really just the new trilogy, but like we also got Rogue One, which is probably one of the
Oh
best Star Wars
yeah,
movies that they made.
that was very underrated.
Um, um, and even movies like Solo. Solo is not as great as some of them, but it's still a fun movie. And like you said, we get the Mandalorian, and it's really you know kind of given us a whole new opportunity to enjoy Star Wars and to re-enjoy it and share it
Yeah,
with other people. So, um, obviously, when we're talking about things of the decade, you can't forget about Star Wars.
yeah. You put next on your list, you put kind of categorize Black Panther, Wonder Woman, Deadpool, Logan, kind of all together. Why did those ones stick out to you? Because those are definitely on my list as well. Maybe for different reasons than yours. I thought they touched on something that was pretty innovative to that particular genre. So, what do you think?
I mean, you probably even have to put the Joker movie on that list too. Kind of the idea I had when I wrote these down is what they stood for. Each movie was different in its own right, but they're all comic book movies that accomplish something different.
Yeah,
Black Panther was, a phenomenal hit. I think it impacted the black community a lot. It gave them somebody, that they've been clamoring for. They wanted a hero that looked like them, and I think that gave them something tremendous to look forward to. It was a great movie. It gave us a lot of different cultural um, views, and what was mostly a predominantly white male driven cast the original movie. So
yeah,
it just started to diversify, not necessarily like just like our pop, like the comic movies in general, and it gave us something to look forward to. And then that right, Wonder Woman, and I'd even put Captain Marvel in this too. Is
yeah,
that
totally.
Wonder Woman being the first one is the first female led superhero movie,
And
and the
it
same
did
kind of thing
well.
that it did do well, and I mean that movie for about 2/3 of the movie is fantastic until
Mm.
it has
It's just
some
shit show at the
really
end.
until it has a shit show in the end. But I mean, what that Wonder Woman movie stood for was more than just that. It was an iconic role, and you saw that with Captain Marvel too. Is that guys and girls were flocking out to see this, and those two movies combined kind of it gave a different audience. It brought a different audience in to see these movies. So,
Yeah.
um,
And
and
I
and
love that you added Deadpool to the list too, because I think this was different in the sense that this is like basically the first rated R comic book movie. And I think a lot of naysayers are saying there's no way it could be done. This movie's going to do horrible. And it ended up, it broke a record for the highest grossing rated R movie in the theater, correct?
yeah, it made damn near $800 million, and
Unreal.
I think total. And the movie before that that had the record for highest R rated was 50 Shades of Grey. So I mean,
Why am I not
uh,
surprised by that?
and just like Deadpool 2, it gave us something completely different and a genre that at the time had several movies that had come out. And Deadpool is still the first movie stands out to me as something to look back on and go back and watch. The second one, albeit was a shit show, but the first Deadpool movie was fantastic. And then piggybacking off that, I mean, like movies like Wonder Woman, Black Panther, and even Logan. Logan actually won an Oscar for best screenplay,
That's right.
and Logan, I think, is probably one of my favorite comic book movies and movies in general. And like we talked about this a long time ago when it came out, is they really expanded on it. Yeah, they used the storytelling, but I mean, like outside of like the comic booky stuff, like this was just a fantastic, tragedy in what it was,
Yeah, sure was.
and I think you could throw the Joker movie in that. I think the Joker movie is less of a comic book movie than any of those. It's more of just a movie that they used really just a kind of the idea of a comic book villain, but it wasn't really tied into anything. So I mean, like in a sense, all these movies kind of revolutionized what we talked about earlier. And the way comic book movies were coming out and just the storytelling in general. So I mean, I think when you look back at this decade, you have to single some of those movies out.
Yeah. Speaking of revolutionizing movies, animated movies have really changed within the last decade. And I don't know if you ever get a chance to go back and look at, now that you have Disney Plus, I'm sure you've gone back and seen some of the animated stuff, but not only is the graphics good, but the music's great and the storylines are fantastic. So, I mean, talk about like movies like Frozen, Inside Out, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Like all of these are super unique as far as graphics and whatever they're using from a computer generated um, animation that they're using, but also just the stories are they're getting so good.
Yeah, I mean, like if you think about the Pixar movies alone, like this year we had Frozen 1 and 2, Toy Story. I think
Yeah,
at least four. I think three and four came out this decade. You got both the Wreck-It Ralph movies, Inside Out. It's a good handful, a good chunk of these, and these are movies that kids and adults love, and generally with these Pixar movies, is that there's also a meaningful message in them too. I mean, you
yeah,
can't talk about animated movies without mentioning really any of the Pixar ones. There's also to a lesser extent like all the Despicable Me movies. Obviously we talked about Into the Spider Verse, which is pretty recent, but that's also um, kind of revolutionized the way that we the animation style, and it was very unique to
yeah,
what it
yeah.
was. And then especially for an animated Spider-Man movie, it did really well too. So gave us something else to look forward to.
I was super skeptical of that one just because of it was very comic booky looking, and I didn't know if I'd like that or not. But the way in which they did it, I thought it was gorgeous. Like what a great movie! I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, it had a very unique style, and I think that was a good chunk of the reason to go see it too, because it was so
Yeah.
it was visually appealing.
Yeah. Let's jump to books that have become, well, book series that have become movies or a movie series. In this case, The Hunger Games sticks out to me as really that series that was successful based on books. I know, I don't know if it was bleeding over into this decade, but the Harry Potter series is another one that I would think of, but I think that was probably the previous decade. But The Hunger Games was definitely that that series for this decade. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the Hunger Games is probably one that comes to mind. Obviously, you have to when you mention that, you have to mention like probably Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
I think Twilight and Harry Potter were at the tail end
Tail end.
of
Yep.
of coming out when like the last couple of movies were coming out, during this decade. So it kind of was branched into both, but obviously the Hunger Games kind of revolutionized, or gave J Law her big
Yeah,
boost to
big break.
stardom.
Hmm.
People loved those books. They loved the movies. I don't really fucking like the movies very much, but
Oh, you didn't? So
I
I
mean,
did. I like the books and the movies are great too.
the Hunger. When you look back on it, the Hunger Games, they for a while they were a big thing.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you, Dan, like one of the things that I have a soft spot for is space movies, and there were so many great ones over this last decade. What were some of your favorites that really stuck out to you as impactful? I mean, there's been a lot of them, and a lot of them are terrible, but there were probably a few handful ones that we loved.
I think out of the small list that we've got here, I mean, because I put four down right off the bat.
Yeah,
Arrival, The Martian, Interstellar, Gravity.
all
I'll
good
even
ones.
throw I'll even throw Life in there too, because that's my wife's favorite. She loves the alien movies, and
No way,
so
that
we
is not on
watch.
a top list. There's no way.
But it came out this decade, so I mean,
True.
that's a movie that we watch all the time because that
Yeah.
she loves that movie so much. But I think out of really any of these movies, probably the Martian was my favorite.
Hmm.
We could even throw Ad Astra into there. I mean, that came out just recently too. I know that you're really big on Interstellar. I never saw Gravity, but like even Arrival was pretty good too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if I had to pinpoint one, I would definitely say The Martian.
Yeah, that was a good one, and I read the book, and I thought they did a really good job of making that a movie, because it was basically the way it was written was in journal entries, but the way they did it as a movie was really good. So I like that. I thought it was good. Like you said, I was big on Interstellar. I actually rewatched it probably a month or two ago. I like it. It's a little long for me, but I like the idea of just space travel and seeing what else is out there and the black holes and whatnot. So I think that's really cool. Arrival was probably my favorite out of all of them, though. And the reason why was just because I thought it shed light on something that was fascinating, because I think, you know, if an alien, like, well, there's so many alien invasion type movies out there, and with this one it was initially that's what they all thought, but then it became more about like how do you like interpret what they're trying to get across, and so they had to learn the language, and I thought it was more about dialogue and communication than it was about anything else. So it was more of a thinking type of movie versus the other ones that are kind of popcorn flicks. So that's my 2 cents. And Gravity was good. It was pretty boring though for the most part, but it's rewatchable.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I really enjoyed a Rebel also. I think to your point, it was pretty unique, and I think that's why it did so well. Critically, and I think it won some awards too. Is that it did have kind of like a unique adaptation, and talking points too was as far as like communication and them trying to break that barrier. So
Yeah.
um, I thought that was pretty interesting. I will say that I probably will never watch Interstellar ever again. It's one of
Oh.
those movies like
All right, all right, all
you
right.
know, it's just one of those movies where if you watch it once, you probably you see everything and you don't really need to watch it again. I mean, if it was shorter, maybe, but I think the one movie that I enjoy the most out of all of them is The Martian, just because it's
Yeah,
so entertaining that you can go back and watch it, and
it's
that's even
true.
just so good.
Yeah, no, it's true. The only reason I rewatched Interstellar was not because it's super rewatchable, but because the length of time that it took, it would eat up an entire plane flight that I had to Texas, and so that was kind of nice because I started it when we when we took off, and then it was over, and I was in Texas, so it passed the time.
There you
it's a
go.
movie I'd probably want to watch if I was like sick in bed or something too,
Yeah, because
because
you
you could fall
just sleep
asleep.
through most of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, let's put on the Irishman and Interstellar back to back, and you could sleep all day.
Oh, brother.
Well, let's move on. There's this genre of horror and sci-fi movies you kind of put together. Horror movies, there hasn't been a lot of great ones that I think in this past decade. Though I'll say The ones that were great and got our attention were the ones that were so unique and different than anything we've ever seen. So why don't you start out with a couple that you were thinking of?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is kind of a good segue, but to kind of branch the two, but we also forgot the big old Cloverfield paradox
Oh yeah.
that came out, and how horrible of a movie that was. But at the time
What?
of it launching on Netflix, it was kind of unique. So that also came out this decade too. We
Yeah.
totally forgot about that, and I wasn't even thinking about it until I saw it on
That actually
Netflix
was
the other day.
yeah, that was actually a fascinating movie, and they did a even better. The best part of that movie was their marketing that they did, because I think they dropped it right at the Super Bowl, and they said like on Netflix now or something like that, and so you naturally
Yeah,
you don't even know much about it other than it's like a follow up to the Cloverfield stuff. And so I think I watched it that night, and I actually enjoyed
yeah,
it.
I did too.
I don't need to see it again, but it was decent enough to watch.
Right. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, I will kind of say that I probably watch horror movies and these sci-fi movies more than you
Way
do,
more, yeah.
and I will say that there's probably I think this decade been kind of more of a resurgence than anything. Kind of speaking on what you were talking about with a lot of different unique things. We've got like the Conjuring universe, so like the Conjuring movies have been like a big staple of kind of this reflux of like basically the Blumhouse pictures. So it's the studio that does a lot of these movies. We've got like the Annabelle movies that branch off of that.
Yeah.
We also had what are they called? It had the same actor in them, but they were pretty scary too. I can't remember the name of it. I'll look at it, but like two that came out specifically were Get Out and Us,
Yeah,
that were kind of record
they
breaking
were.
movies as
And they're
far
so
as those are
unique.
concerned.
Yeah,
And
very unique.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're different kinds of horror movies, whereas they're very terrifying in a realism, like sense, especially Get Out. Um, and the thing that was unique about it too was that it was predominantly African American led cast, director and everything too, and everyone knows the stereotype about the black guy always dying in the movie first, and so
Gosh.
it was kind of a interesting take, and you know they're fantastic movies, and if you haven't had a chance to see them, like make sure you watch them with all the lights out, and at night, really get into it.
hmm Yeah, I felt like I've watched horror movies every once in a while, but like Us and Get Out were the ones that stuck out to me just because it felt so different compared to all the other horror movies that have been out. Um, like you mentioned, like Annabelle and The Conjuring, all those are sort of related to, demons or ghosts and possession of whatever object or body, or Annabelle's a doll or whatever. So there, those have been kind of going on for decades. Like those kind of movies, yeah, the stories are a little different, but it kind of has the same, I don't know, story arc, if you will. But like Get Out and Us, you're sort of like, what in the hell's kind of happening here? And I thought the storylines were unique enough to kind of get me. A Quiet Place was another one I thought was super unique, and it's thrilling. I think it's what I would say about Get Out, Us, and A Quiet Place was that those were so unique in a way that it kept me on my toes, and it wasn't necessarily predictable. What do you think about that? Just the predictability of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment too. I think especially when you're talking about A Quiet Place, and like I had the luxury of seeing that in the theater, and you and I had kind of an interesting conversation about it. Well, after is like that's a movie that if you see, and like luckily we went when it was not as packed, but like everybody's super quiet in
hmm
the theater, and like everybody, it creates a sense of tension, and that's what really what you're looking for in a good movie like this is that tension that it creates, not necessarily the scares, but it's what gets your adrenaline going, and that's what you're looking
Yeah.
for.
One movie that you didn't have on this list that I'm curious if you even would consider it a horror, but Brightburn. I know it's recent, so recency bias, but I thought that was, thrilling and scary enough to possibly put on this list. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good call out. I guess when I was looking at it, I wasn't really thinking, um, about a lot of the recency biasy, but Brightburn is a good one, especially because it
Hmm.
was a unique take on kind of
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Superman, and and um like I said, I saw this movie in theater too, and
Yeah,
I enjoyed it too. James Gunn, the Gunn family, had the creative minds
yeah.
behind this, so obviously it's fantastic. Another one that came to mind too, while I was thinking about it too, is
Oh, I
Cabin in the
never saw
Woods.
that.
This came out like right at
Yeah,
the
I
one
never
with Chris
saw it.
Hemsworth.
No, I never did.
Really?
Should
I
have.
just sworn
No,
I
no,
just
no.
when you
Every time I see it like pop up like for free or something, I'm like, oh, I should watch that. I've heard nothing but great things about it.
Yeah, this actually came out like right at the kind of the turn of the
Yeah.
the 2000s, and it's fantastically done. It has a lot of meta
Hmm.
commentary on things, but it classifies as a horror
Yeah.
movie.
Fascinating.
And it's really really good. It's also
Yeah.
really funny too. Um, it's very reminiscent to like Ready or Not. Like you like
Hmm.
Ready or Not,
I loved it.
you'll have you'll enjoy Cabin in the
Yeah.
Woods.
I guess I gotta call bullshit on the point that I made earlier about me not watching horror films at all, because I just came up with another one that I thought was really good, and it's a little bit more recent, but Hereditary. Do you remember that movie?
Oh
That
yeah,
was
yeah.
that was a unique one too, and I mean, there's a lot of chilling.
That movie was fucked
It was
up.
really messed up, and like the ending was like I was so confused, and I mean, it made sense, but it was just not at all what I was thinking it was going to be. So I like that one. I would put it on the list for probably best of the decade.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I put it in my best. Like that movie was like that was fucked up, and I don't think I could watch that movie ever again.
Oh, it
But
was disturbing, right? It was
um,
like something you remember. That's for sure.
yeah, in that sense too. Another one I have for you too. That this is like it's very fucked up movie, and I don't know if a ton of people watched it, but Scott Derrickson actually directed this. The director of the first Doctor Strange movie.
Okay.
It's called Sinister. I know I've
Yeah, 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 yeah,
talked
yeah.
to you about it
Yep,
before. That I put that up with a Hereditary word. It's a fucked up movie, and like
that's
if
right.
you watch it, like you will definitely have thoughts, and
Uh,
definitely have some morbid dreams.
God, really? Okay, I haven't seen that, but it might be worth checking out.
Oh yeah, it's good. Like it's a good like if you're looking for a movie that's gonna just like leave you like shaking your head, like yeah, it's
Oh,
good.
geez. It's funny because like in my, with all the reading that I do and focus on positivity and happiness and growth and leadership and all that stuff, a lot of the leadership books out there would say, or even self-help books, they'd say like, okay, don't watch the news. Don't watch horror movies. Like you stick to that and you're going to be more happy and less stressed out and anxiety ridden and all that stuff. And it's funny here we are talking about what horror movies to watch.
It's funny that they would say that. I mean, because you have to entertain yourself. You have to put yourself in a position to enjoy things like that. And they're
To know that it's not real
watching
either.
a scary movie. Yeah, watching a scary movie for the first time it's always enjoyable, especially if it's a good one, because you don't know what to expect, and like it gets your fucking blood
Yeah,
boiling. I mean, like that's the point of it, and like you don't get that in real life a lot. Hopefully you don't have to experience that
true.
on a regular basis
Yeah.
everywhere in your normal life. So I mean, I like them. They're fun, especially when they're well done. Insidious was the
Oh
other
yeah,
movie I
that's a good
was
one.
thinking about too. Those kind of help kick it off. a lot of good things, and it's kind of helped create, kind of inflated. It's kind of like the new zombie thing with the amount of movies we have. But when you get a lot of good ones, you definitely
Yeah.
appreciate them. That's for sure.
I can't remember if you already had mentioned this, but did you say anything about the new It movies?
I didn't, but I think you can put a whole bullet point for the new Stephen King, like
Yeah.
Stephen
Mm-hmm.
King being kind of making a comeback too, with the Flurry too. I mean, just several things like Doctor Sleep. I would put that in that category. Obviously, The Dark Tower is
I
more
didn't
of
like that at all.
sci-fi
Yeah.
than it is really horror. Um, several things on Netflix that he's got. Obviously, it and It Chapter 2 you could put in there
Yeah.
too.
I thought it part one was pretty good, and even parts of it too was not bad, but I really didn't like the second part at all.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't as enjoyable
No.
as the first one, the first part.
Well, we created and you started this, but I totally agree with it. But you put a whole category of Tom Cruise, the resurgence of as a category we wanted to talk about, because this, for one, this guy doesn't age, and he's probably in his mid-50s, and he's still pumping out movies.
I think he's older than that. I think
He
he's in
might
his
be close
60s.
to 60 or above 60, but I've heard nothing but great things about him as far as his work ethic. Like he just genuinely loves making movies and learning and growing, and he's made some really entertaining movies. One that sticks out to my mind, and I know it's something that you like as well, but the movie Edge of Tomorrow, that was such a great movie, and it's one of the most rewatchable Tom Cruise movies that is out there right now.
Yeah, when it first came out, I think a lot of the allure to it was that Tom Cruise kind of set aside his ego and allowed himself to die several times in this movie, and it had a very like a mysterious um, thematic to it, and story, and that's what brings you back to watch it again and see if there's different clues that you missed. And it's always cool to kind of go back and see it, and it's definitely fantastic. And it's kind of one of the more unique movies that we got. I'd say this decade, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
By the way, he's 57 years old. So between
That's
him and
pretty
Paul
close.
Rudd, who happens to be 50 years old, like those dudes don't age. And if I can look anything like them later on in life, which I won't, I would say it's a pretty good life.
Mm. Yeah, something like
Mission
that.
Impossible. Those movies have always been, Tom Cruise movies to a T. Like those are action oriented. They're the theme music in itself is great, but just like they're always known for crazy explosions and cool technology. Like what do you think of the three that came out this decade?
I actually love them all. I think they're all fantastic. I think the only one that I don't own is Rogue Nation, which was the middle one. But I like them all, especially Fallout, dude. Like Fallout's so good to go back and watch. Like I actually, my parents came down and they watched it too, and they actually really enjoyed it. The Mission Impossible movies are equivalent to like the James Bond movies, but they're more of like a spy thriller than kind of really more popcorny and like Americanized than I guess you'd say James Bond movies. Um, but they've all got excellent casts, and I mean, like Tom
Yeah.
Cruise is at his best, doing some of this stuff, and he does a lot of his own
Mm-hmm.
fucking stunts, and some of the stunts and shit that they do in these movies are
I know
fucking
I don't
crazy,
know how
dude.
people don't get hurt or killed in some of these. Like I don't even know how they do these stunts. It's insane.
Well, actually, Tom Cruise
Mm,
sprained his ankle, and they had to shut down
that's
production for a
crazy.
couple of weeks. I think that was the most
Unbelievable.
recent one. Uh, I'm just looking through the movies that he made this decade, and I guess we can't forget to mention The Mummy. So it wasn't all good. It wasn't all
That is
good for
true.
Tom Cruise this
Yeah.
decade. I'd also say another one that comes to mind too was
That
Oblivion.
was a
Oblivion was
really
kind of
weird
a weird
movie.
movie, but
Yeah.
I thought that was
It's
pretty good
one I
too.
forget about, but I do remember. I think I saw that in theater, and I remember liking it, but it was one that I'm not going to watch again.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the standouts we talked about are kind of the highlight points for these that kind
Mm-hmm.
of reinvigorated, and I don't think without these movies that we get that Top Gun sequel that we're getting
Yeah.
this year.
There's another movie that I'm thinking of, and I cannot remember the name of it, but wasn't he basically he was a pilot trafficking drugs back and forth between like Colombia and America?
American Made.
That's yeah. I actually really like that movie.
Yeah,
That was good. And that's again more recent, but
I haven't
oh,
watched
it's
that.
good. It's really good. I think you'd like that.
Yeah, I haven't watched
Are
that.
you backing up the dump truck?
Yep, you know it.
Garbage man's here. So there's a category that a couple categories that I wanted to talk about that I thought if we didn't add these, we might be missing some really key important things this decade and just where we've kind of come. But war movies always stick out to me. Like there's tons of them, but I felt like with this decade because we're kind of coming on the heels of the Iraq War and all that, there's several movies that I thought highlighted the issues that people are dealing with as they're coming back from war. So American Sniper, Lone Survivor, and there's a movie that it's really not well known at all, but it's called Thank You for Your Service. I think they all kind of came out around the same time, but two of which in particular deal with, so American Sniper and Thank You for Your Service really deal with the after effects of what war is, like the post-traumatic stress disorders and just being reinvigorated into uh the lifestyle that Americans have and leaving your basically your brothers behind. So those movies really highlighted the emotional aspect of that, and I thought they were really powerful. And then Lone Survivor is just a crazy story about a group of SEALs that are essentially ambushed and they have nowhere to go, and then one of them gets captured and just the rest die. And so that was just a hell of a story based on a book and a real story. So I don't particularly love war movies, but those they struck a chord with me because I know people who have been in those wars and have been overseas, and it's just it's disturbing. It's kind of like like if somebody saw Saving Private Ryan and they knew several people that were in World War II and went through all that and what they came back to. I think it's kind of the same deal, but this is kind of a modern era look at it. So I don't know what you think, if you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, those are all good points, and three others that would come to mind that there are kind of in that same grasp. Like the first one I would say is 13 Hours, which is
Oh
actually a very underrated
yes,
Michael Bay
yes,
movie.
that's a good one.
Um, so that is a different kind of aspect of war, and that was the fallout from the
Mm-hmm.
Benghazi conflict. Um, Actually, another one I think about too is you can kind of consider it a war movie, but not really. Is the one with um, Jessica Chastain, where they interrogate people. Um,
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
I
I'm
I
gonna look
own
it
it.
up.
It's while I think about that,
Zero
there's
Dark
two
30.
others that come to mind. Yeah,
I have not seen that
Zero Dark
movie.
30. It's actually really good. I think you would like it too. And basically, the premise is that um, Jessica Chastain is kind of like an investigator, and like she helps interrogate these prisoners, basically that they have at Guantanamo Bay to try to track
No, I
down
thought
these
this was the one where
terrorists that are
they
responsible.
go for Osama bin Laden. Isn't that the okay?
Yeah, yeah. So they're interrogating these people that they have in Guantanamo Bay, and they show all these different interrogations, and they end up leading him to Osama, basically.
Is it worth watching? Do you like it?
Um, yeah,
Good.
yeah,
Okay,
it's a
I'll check it
fantastic
out.
movie. Another one that I would put is Fury is one of the favorites I have. I
Yeah,
always
that's a
like
really good one.
World War, like Saving Private Ryan is one of my favorite movies of all time, and like
Yeah.
Fury was a really gripping movie, and it kind of showed you a different aspect of war with the the tank battles, and some of those tank battles they have in there are fantastic.
They are.
And one that we kind of overlooked is Overlord, which came out pretty recently.
That opening scene was like one of the most incredible pieces of filmmaking I've ever seen.
Yeah, so I actually took this movie to my parents on. We watched this on Christmas, I think, and my mom and dad actually both really liked it. It's not your typical war movie. Obviously, It deals with some of the themes that were prevalent during that time. Everyone knows. Hitler was very into the cult and different weird aspects, and them trying to create super soldiers, and it was good. It's certainly kind of a crossbreed between a horror movie and a war movie, but it's fantastic regardless.
Yeah, I love that a lot. So I thought unless you have anything else, I thought we'd end this show by talking about something that's like, it's probably going to come into this next decade as well, but I think we saw a little bits and pieces of it, is this whole idea of the all women cast, or a woman featured film. So we had, I thought was such a great movie. I like comedy movies. So Bridesmaids always sticks out as one of those movies where it's an all-woman cast. It's funny as hell, and I think it's a lot of the SNL, people that kind of move on throughout their career and then they get into movies and whatnot. And I thought they did a really good job of this. It reminded me a lot of like a Hangover sort of movie, but an all-woman cast, and I thought they did it the right way. Another one that sticks out in my mind as one that didn't go so well was Ghostbusters. So they do kind of an all-woman cast. It started out as an all-male cast, in the 80s when it first came out, and now they wanted to do an all-woman cast, and I just didn't think they did it. I think they rushed it, or they tried too hard and it didn't go well. But I imagine, just like we talked about with not Captain America, but Captain Marvel and Wonder Woman, I think we're going to see more and more movies that are blockbuster type films, and they will be woman led. What do you think?
You'd also put the Ocean's 8 remake in that category too. I have no issue with them doing that. I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of I don't really like a lot of the people. Like, I don't like Melissa McCarthy. I don't really like him. So, I mean, it depends on your taste. If it's for you, that's good. I mean, support it for sure. As long as they're well made, it shouldn't matter who's in the movie.
I agree. Yeah, no, I'm all for it. Like, there's I think my wife really liked the movie. I think it's Bad Moms, and I thought that was hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a bridesmaids sort of deal with comedy, all women led, and I really liked it, and I'm all for it. So as long as it can, build a good cast and a good screenplay for it, I say bring it on.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, as long as it's a well done movie, it shouldn't matter. I mean, for me, a lot of times the comedy movies that I enjoy usually have like your typical people that I enjoy watching, and I just never been big on like Melissa McCarthy and some of those people, so I'm not really drawn to them as much. And, I tried watching Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was really fucking bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't really get the appeal of Bridesmaids. Like, it's funny, but
man,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just not my style.
But really, the only reason I bring up the all-woman cast thing is because I think it's been such a male-dominated industry for so long that I think when now you have the all-woman cast thing, it's starting to be inclusive, because that's what people want to see. They want to see different people that represent who's watching the movies, and I think you're starting to see that more and more, where it's not even just women, but you're seeing, especially more in TV shows, but you're starting to see, more gay, lesbian, and transgender. Like, I'm seeing this pop up a lot. And I think that's what people want. I mean, for me, it doesn't really matter either way, but I think there's more emphasis on that to be inclusive overall.
Yeah. I mean, I'd even throw out the talking point of, how well Crazy Rich Asians was.
Oh yeah, that was
too.
a good one. I like that a lot.
I think, just diversity in general, we kind of talked a lot about it in just the comic book movies, but I think you're seeing that on the, just in this platform in general, as trying to see representation all over. And I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, as long as you do it well, like we've seen that in the past where they have tried to, take predominantly like, white male characters and turn them into black male characters just to have it. And they don't really change the story, set up a story for it. Like it's the age old concept of why James Bond is this, always a white male is, well, that's basically what the character is like, that's who he is. And, that's an age old debate. And, I think as long as it's done well and it makes sense, it should never matter who you have cast in it. I just want to see a great performance and it makes sense.
Well said. Well, this has been a hell of a year for movies. This is kind of part one to our best of the decade show. In next episode, we're going to go through the best shows of the decade that we liked. And honestly, I think this list is even bigger. So the next show, look forward to that, because I think this has been the decade for shows. I mean, movies have always kind of been there, and there's been things that stick out from what's going on in the world at that moment. But I think there's been so many shows, particularly because of Netflix and Amazon Prime and all these other distribution channels that are internet based, that I think there's just so much stuff out there that, we're not going to be able to cover everything, but there's a lot that we're going to talk about. So I'm excited for that show, Dan.
Yeah. So I guess the one way we should end this is gun to your head, your favorite movie of the decade.
Oh gosh. What sticks out in my mind? I didn't even talk about it in this because I didn't really know where to put it, but Ex Machina was probably my favorite movie. I don't know why, it sticks out in my head. It's like kind of a perfect combination between suspense and sci-fi, and just kind of one of those, like I thought a lot about it. It left me, like, after it was over, I was like, holy shit, like what's gonna happen now? You know what I mean? Like, and you're sort of left to think about like what's going to happen after this robot's basically out in the world, but looks like a human and can talk like a human. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I still have to watch it.
Shit! I just spoiled the end for you then. Damn it.
That's okay. That's fine. That's okay.
What was it? Okay, gun to your head. What do you say?
Mad Max Fury Road.
Really? I would not have expected that.
Mad Max Fury Road.
Okay. You just totally took me off guard there. I mean, I liked it a lot. I have to. I need to rewatch it. It was a good movie.
Yeah, no, it's probably one of my favorite movies. I think Nancy and I went and saw this in theater like 3 times. It's still so rewatchable. I just think out of most of the movies we've talked about, I think it stands out as, kind of like for you, Ex Machina, as it resonates with you on a different level. Obviously, like Avengers Endgame is like a really close number 2. But I just think the one that I enjoyed the most and I love watching is Mad Max Fury Road. It's just fucking intense. It's still to this day.
Good stuff. Well, hey, this has been a really fun episode. There's so much to look forward to, and there's so much that we could probably rewatch from the last decade. So, what do we miss, guys? Tweet at us. I'm at Brandon Laws. Dan's at Dizzy Zebo, and our handle for Talking Entertainment is at TE from Rip City. So tweet at us. We'd love to know what you thought was the best of the decade, the stuff that we missed, and look forward to our next show, which will be all about TV shows, best TV shows of the decade, and we'll touch on that next time. Thanks, Dan.
Peace.